This week, we're joined by Phillip Mills, founder and executive director at Les Mills International, the world's largest creator and distributor of group exercise programs for health clubs. A former international track and field competitor, Phillip attended UCLA on an athletic scholarship, graduating in philosophy. On his return to New Zealand, he became one of the pioneers of the international fitness industry. As well as his ongoing involvement in Les Mills International, where Les Mills programs are taught by 140,000 certified instructors in 20,000 licensed clubs in over 100 countries, Phillip maintains an active involvement in managing the chain of Mills family-owned health clubs throughout New Zealand, which host more than 60,000 members. Alongside some of New Zealand's most prominent business leaders, Phillip also leads Pure Advantage, which lobbies for green economic policy. We learn from Phillip about maintaining resilience and building a successful international business while his roots remain firmly in New Zealand. This is the Monday Call, brought to you by NZ Funds.
Wow, they are seriously big numbers, and the scale of it is actually really hard to comprehend. So the story, I'm very excited to hear where you've come to and how you got there. So thank you for joining us, and maybe I just pass the ball over. Where did your love of sport and ultimately the fitness industry first come from?
Okay, thanks. Very nice to be here. I grew up on Grayland Park. We lived at the bottom of Dickens Street back in the days when Grayland Park was New Zealand's top athletics track, and I watched Peter Snell run against Kip Keino on Grayland Park, if you can believe that. Looking at it now, I
can't somehow.
But half of our house was our house, and half was sort of the Auckland Weightlifting Federation gym, and so we had weightlifters and throwers. A lot of track athletes who were working out there all since before I was born, I guess. And I grew up with that, and those were the people, my heroes and my idols, who I looked up to. The family opened the first public gym in 1968. Mum and Dad opened that down at 23 Victoria Street, about 50 metres up from Queen Street. It was a little gym, and we had to have men's and women's days on separate days. When I was 13, I was sort of cleaning the locker rooms and the toilets and things for an after-school job in there. But everybody who we employed really were coaches or sports coaches from athletics or gymnastics or weightlifting or martial arts or something like that. So pretty sort of inspirational group of people, and constantly, teaching and sort of talking and interested in the latest training techniques for things. So that would have been where I got my inspiration, and I guess my love for the whole industry, the fitness industry.
So I guess family were your role models, and then you met a whole bunch of people through that. It's a destiny in the making. And so how did you actually become involved in Les Mills, and at what point did you realise that, hey, this is an industry that I want to spend my career in? Right.
Well, as I say, when I was 13, I was cleaning the locker rooms.
That was the
after
beginning.
Hours, and they started really to let me free on the clients when I was about 15 or 16 years old, and just the guys who were helping me and coaching me were inspirational sports coaches from different sports codes, and you fall in love with it. You get inspired and you fall in love with it very early on.
I don't know if at the time you would have known what a phenomenon it's become, but Body Pump, Body Combat, Body Balance are global sensations, and with incredible followings. How did the inspiration for, I think, Body Pump was the first one? How did that originally develop? And what did you need to do to bring it to life?
Sure. When, as you said in the introduction, I was at university in LA in the 70s for 4 years, doing an undergrad degree there. And I was there while aerobics was being born, and it wasn't called aerobics at the time. But, I sort of saw the beginning of the leotards and leg warmers era and brought those ideas back to New Zealand, but really incorporated them into the sort of stuff that we'd done with sports training. So right throughout the 80s, we had classes that were based on kind of sports calisthenics and lots of different weight training classes with dumbbells and with circuit training and stuff that we'd done for training for sport. And those are the kind of classes that we created, and they were just hugely popular. We, at that little gym, we moved to a bigger gym in 1978, still on Victoria Street where it currently is, but we kept the little gym open, and we opened that as an aerobic centre. And we had people lining up the hill, up the road 50 metres to get into those classes. And so, the classes kind of evolved based on the things that we were doing at the time. And Body Pump was an evolution of the weight training classes. Just one day, I saw a short barbell, shorter than normal barbell. And I thought, we could use that in a class, and then we won't have to have sort of hundreds of different dumbbells of all different weights for people to be kind of walking on and off the floor and getting, and you'll just be able to have a little bar and a stack of weights next to you. And that's where that idea kicked off, really. A simple little, just seeing a short barbell and thinking, well, we'll be able to use that in a class without people hitting each other. In the end, we kind of wound up being able to use normal sized barbells and didn't use the short one. But the class concept of being able to change the weights as you go, have heavier stuff for squatting and have lighter stuff for curls or for your different types of weight training, that really worked. And Pump, we wound up creating a class where you did about 1,000 reps of different barbell exercises within a class. And normally people would, in a workout on their own, maybe do 100, 200 reps, something like that. So we were getting enormous results from the class, and it was a lot of fun to do weight training to music. And it ultimately just took off, went crazy when we introduced it internationally. It, by the end of the 90s, was the biggest class in the world, the biggest fitness class in the world.
Exporting the class, if you can call it that, and sort of bringing that story to the world is, it's a big undertaking. And, I imagine along the way you would have had to overcome a whole lot of hurdles and practical components to it. What do you need to do practically at that time and even now to bring an idea like that and distribute it across, thousands of people and thousands of gyms across the world, and so that there's consistency and a commonality across it all? I mean, practically, how do you physically do that?
You did right. There were some really big hurdles. We went early, and we had a lot of success in New Zealand in the early 80s, and we went on from New Zealand into Australia in the early 80s, but that was really tough going. It was taking ourselves to another country the first time was just a lot of work, learning even the difference between New Zealand and Australia. The business culture is very different, and the competition in Australia was different, and it was tough, and it took us quite a while to break through there. And when our New Zealand company went public, I sort of moved back into that, and we really stopped. We had a few gyms in Australia, but we stopped really trying to sell the aerobics programs into other countries. And then when we created Pump, we had an Australian gym owner, actually been a New Zealand swim coach who was working at the Australian Institute of Sport, Bill Robertson, who he come out of Dunedin. He was a swimmer and a swim coach, a good one. And he had a gym in Canberra, and he saw Pump and said, "Hey, can I have the Aussie sort of distributorship for this?" And we said, "Yeah, sure. We're not really doing anything with growing stuff much. Classes in licensing them to other gyms around Australia anymore. And he did very well with them. And we sort of saw, okay, that's a business model. Rather than having to open up in different countries and fight these battles ourselves, you get a distributor who's well established in the country and can do that stuff for you. So we went round the world, went to conventions and networked like crazy, and found people who would make suitable distributors for us. Probably half, 2/3 of them did a pretty good job of it, and some of them did a terrible job. Some of them were dishonest and ripped us off terribly. And then over time, we started then to take over some of those distributors and to do it ourselves. And typically, as they wanted to retire or sell or something like that, we would keep their teams, keep their staff, and we would buy the distributorship back. And bit by bit that happened. Now we own about 2/3 of our distributors around the world, 110 odd countries, and we have about 1/3 of them who are still independently owned. For instance, we've got, Bill Robertson, the initial guy out of Australia. He runs a lot of Southeast Asia as well as Australia. Does a fantastic job there. We're in about 90% of the gyms in Australia. We've got a French guy, Christophe Andanson, who was a French Olympic wrestler, who was just fantastic at the job and wonderful leader. People wanted to follow him. He runs now all of the French-speaking territories in the world for us. That's about 39 countries that he runs, and a lot of them are little countries. We're only in a few gyms there, but you couldn't do that. You couldn't do that better than him.
I think I saw a video of a French class must have had 1,000 people, 2,000 people in it. I couldn't believe the scale of it, and it felt too big to be New Zealand. Yeah,
you might have seen it. There was a big event that they ran for a few years at the Grand Palais in Paris, where they would have up to 5,000 people in a class.
It's completely bonkers.
Mind-blowing,
yeah. And so I guess the thing there is there two things that I think observations is one, the energy in those classes, is just it's sort of overwhelming. People, you just see everyone just beaming on their face and going for it and doing 10 times the number of reps that they otherwise perhaps would. And then I guess you were seeing that in New Zealand and then trying to bring that abroad and so you kind of got this backbone of, I know this can work and there's this magic here if we can just get our toe in and really share it.
Yeah, we weren't the only ones who did it. First of all, it's probably worth understanding that the gym industry, the fitness industry, it's half about exercise and it's half about motivation. Because anybody can exercise. You can exercise in your living room and you can go running around the block. But the majority of people don't, because they don't have the motivation. And so gyms are places where people go as much as anything to get motivated to exercise. And motivation comes in all sorts of different forms, but some of the big ones are music and kind of teachers driving you along and big groups of people. And so classes, what we call group fitness, group exercise or group training, that's sort of the sharp end of motivating people. And as you say, it gets huge results. And people were discovering that really, were just moving out of the leotards and leg warmers era at the end of the 80s. And we took weight training classes to the world. You had a South African guy who took bike classes, spinning classes, created spinning and took that to the world. And then you had an American guy who took group martial arts classes to music to the world with Taibo. So there were a bunch of us in the 90s who did stuff like that and really grew the whole category into something much bigger than what it had been in the 80s with the old aerobics era.
And you mentioned earlier that, this was the early 80s when you're kind of going out into Australia and into the world, and then the crash happened. Can you take us through sort of what the impact was for the business and how you navigated that?
Yes, absolutely. So we had gyms in New Zealand and Australia. We had a chain of gyms, and we went public with that in 1984. And that's sort of really getting involved with opening more gyms of our own, as opposed to what we were doing with licensing our classes to gyms. We'd license our classes to, I don't know, maybe a few hundred gyms around New Zealand and Australia. But when we really went into expanding our own gyms with this public company, sort of took our eye off that ball for a while. And that did really slow us down in sort of expanding in international licensing. Then in 87, our public company was taken over about a month before the share market crash. There was a little group of investment companies who made mum and dad an offer that was too good for them to refuse, and they sold out, and I stayed in. I had a little shareholding, had about 4% of the company at that stage, but I was charged with managing it and for these investment companies, and pretty quickly they all went bust. You had with the share market crash in September or October, whatever it was, towards the end of 87, just about all of the investment companies in New Zealand and the property companies that had proliferated through the 80s went broke. And you had sort of about a year after the share market crash, you had a property market crash as well. And so I wound up having the receivers of the different companies come back to me and say, hey, we'll finance you to run these and you can own them. We'll sell them to you and we'll give you the money. And so I wound up, having about $10 million worth of debt from those companies, friendly sort of debt, which was a lot of money for me. $10 million doesn't sound like much now, but for me in the late 80s, that was an immense amount of money. And I sort of, in some cases, I had, half of the different assets or companies that the things had been broken down into. And I worked my way over the next 5 years into paying back the debts and buying back all the bits and pieces of the different companies and sort of, just had to learn
down and make it happen.
Had to make it happen. Really had no choice. But it was stressful, and you learn a lot when you have to figure out how to pay when you own the company, and you have to figure out how to pay the wages next week and how to pay back the debt burden and all that.
But you made it through, and the legacy now continues. So, and then what was it? 30 years later, something like that, another attack happened, COVID. And so you've had to overcome, I guess, another big hurdle there. But during the COVID period, the Les Mills brand seemed to grow from strength to strength. I mean, I went from seeing it, this is just an anecdotal experience, but a little bit, and then it was just ever present somehow. How was your experience during the COVID period, and how did you think about leveraging what was taking place for the benefit of the business?
Sure. Look, first of all, the gym industry traditionally did well through recessions. We have been through the Asian crisis and the dot-com bubble burst and then the GFC and even that one in the 87, 88 crash that lasted through till about 93. The gym industry had kept growing. We were on trend there, and during the GFC, when people were asked what they'd let go of last, their gym membership was I think the second to last thing that they'd let go of. So the pandemic was different because we were forced to close. We weren't allowed to open in our doors, but what we did was to pivot, and fortunately, we had been working online for 6 or 7 years before that. We had been trying to have a direct-to-consumer option, which we could see was coming as part of the future, and we really were ready for this in the pandemic when it came. We had set our tech platforms up. We'd set our sort of online marketing systems up, and we were ready for it. And we were a bit lucky. We were one of the first to really launch big online platforms. Obviously, well, we'd launched a few years before that, but we'd really just put our foot to the floor. You had Peloton and you had a few others who were already there in that space, but yeah, we were lucky. We were ready for it, and we managed to survive the pandemic with the gyms being shut, and with the 20 odd thousand gyms around the world who we were selling things to, who were paying us license fees, also being shut. We were able to supply stuff to people in their homes. Also, we sold a lot of equipment. We did, along the way, we'd created an equipment company that designed and marketed equipment for classes to gyms around the world, and we're able to sell that direct to consumers. So we survived, and in the process of really doing the home fitness thing, you had to spend a lot of money on marketing that, and so we tremendously increased the amount of money that we spent on marketing. The first year we spent 35 million on marketing those classes. The second year we spent 55 million. So that, yes, you're right in your perception. The brand has grown around the world, rather than just growing at sort of grassroots in gyms who would promote body pump and body combat, etc. We were out there really marketing it on YouTube and on Instagram and other social media companies. So the brand presence has grown. The consumer brand has grown throughout the world.
And the pivot worked, obviously. So now you've got the best of both worlds. The gyms are back open, and you've got this huge sort of brand awareness and I'm sure a large subscribership.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. There were something like 75,000 fitness apps which opened during the pandemic. So supply dramatically increased. And since the pandemic ended, there are still a lot more people doing home fitness as part of what they do. But really, people have gone back to the gyms, and the market hasn't grown for home fitness. So it's very competitive out there. We have managed to grow slightly with our home fitness since the end of the pandemic. And that's, most people have gone backwards a lot. You would have read some of the problems that some of the big operators like Peloton had. Peloton went from being a $50 billion company at its peak market cap during the pandemic to, I don't know what they're worth now, but I think it's under $5 billion. So it got tough out there for a lot of the people who gone into that business. And we have managed to slightly grow, which we're very proud of, but our core business of selling to gyms has gone back to being what it was, and our own gyms are gradually sort of growing back to the membership that they were at before the pandemic. We think probably it'll be until 2025 around the world until people have fully come back to gyms to the level that they were at pre-pandemic, but it's happening. The gyms are growing back rapidly, and that gym industry is going on being a real growth business, a real on-trend business.
That culture of fitness and the sort of the community thing that exists around it is something that you really feel it in your gyms, but it's also something that needs to exist for other gyms to thrive as well. How have you sort of thought about and how have you achieved that kind of community focus within the Les Mills brand, if you will? So is that something people who go to Les Mills seem to always go to Les Mills, and they put stickers on the back of their cars, and they have really long-term subscriptions. It's not on and off every year. How has that kind of community and connectedness to the brand been fostered through the years?
That's that's an interesting one, and people around the world do say that. They say when they come to New Zealand to see our classes in our gyms, that there is a real special culture in them. And I think there is, and I think that it does probably go right back to the fact that we our culture came from sports coaches, from people who are really passionate about fitness and about sports. And I think that that's just grown throughout the years. The people who work in our gyms have a real passion for what they do, and it is a nice industry to work in. You are improving people's lives. You're making people healthier and happier, and it's people do love that aspect of working in the industry. So I think that's just continued to a large degree. And of course, the classes, that we've built, they do create motivation. And
they have a following. My wife, religiously if she could, would go to Gandalf's class on Wednesday at 6 o'clock.
Right.
And, that is her greatest joy in the week. The people themselves develop a following, and you seem to obviously attract real talent within the industry.
Those instructors they're a new type of rock star in the world. Fitness has become a giant part of modern culture. If you measure the number of hours that people spend playing different sports every week, fitness is the biggest adult sport in the world now. People spend more hours going to gyms than they do playing just about all other adult sports combined. And some of those people have become real rock stars. Some of our people, like Gandalf, if he teaches at a big convention overseas, he'll have thousands of people going nuts in a class and mobbing him. Yeah.
Can I get your autograph, please?
Selfies, thousands of selfies.
Technology is changing the industry. Obviously, the digital piece that you talked about with Les Mills Plus, but more generally, it seems to be ever present. How do you think about embracing technology within your gyms and the role it has to play in fitness?
It's a two-edged sword. Within the gyms, there have been some bad experiences with it. There have been some gym chains around the world that have just tried to remove people from it and make everything technological. You plug your card into the different machines and it tells you what to do and measures you and gives you the feedback. But what we've found is that humans are a very important part of the process, especially when you get into something like the big classes with, like you say, the rock star teachers who are leading them and building these big communities. I think at the other end of that, where I think we'll go is in gamification. So you look at if you look at the paradigm now with the online exercise, people are saying, it's great community, it's gamified, but it's not really. When I look at what my grandkids are doing with their video gaming, with their earphones on and with their yelling and jumping around with all sorts of people around the world who are on their mates who are on their teams versus other teams. Fitness is nowhere near that. And I think that we will move more in that direction. I think that's where technology will play a bigger part in motivating people to exercise. We dipped our toe in the water with that about a year ago. We launched a body combat game on the Oracle system, with the great big headsets on the Meta platform, and that was with Body Combat. We worked with a Spanish company who created a lot of VR sort of content. So it's a Body Combat VR game with a couple of our top instructors, Dan Cohen and Rachel Newsham, as real humans in it. And they're global rock stars. But they're in a VR world, with sort of with crazy environments and with sort of things coming flying at you that you've got to punch and kick out of the way. And that did pretty well. It got rated the number one fitness game on the Meta platform, which we're pretty pleased with. But a long way to go. We're sort of looking at the next stages of that. But this is a big, very expensive conversion to move to true virtual fitness gaming. We've got another class that we make called the Trip, which is in probably more than half of our gyms around New Zealand. But you've got a giant screen. You might have in the Auckland, the big Auckland City Club. We've got a 20-meter screen and 100 bikes, and the VR content takes a team of half a dozen people about 3 months to make for every class. You're riding your bike with 100 other people through another planet or through a city in the future or something like that. But this is big, expensive stuff. It costs us about $500,000 to create every one of these classes, and so for the industry to move to this next paradigm it's going to take some time, but I think it will be very interesting and exciting. I don't think that gyms will be hurt by that. I think that people will always want to commune with other people. I think that's one of the things that has driven the growth of the fitness industry, has been probably the fact that people don't go to the pub so much after work. A lot of us have got much busier, and we sort of don't play team sports and things, sadly, quite as much as we used to. A lot of the ways in which people traditionally have communed are not as big as they used to be, and the gym has replaced a lot of those. And so I think, that aspect and a lot of other aspects of motivation in the gyms, like going to live music. You've had online music has grown hugely, but live music concerts are bigger than they've ever been. So I think that gyms will continue to get better and bigger and more diverse in their offerings. But I think we will see another burst of growth with gamification of fitness at home.
The VR headsets are still big, heavy things, right? And, doing sweaty gym activity with a big, heavy thing is quite, it's not yet, and, a particularly pleasant, I imagine. I've never done it, but you can imagine in 3 years' time or something when the equivalent of a Google Glasses or something, where it's much smaller, much more convenient, and you can kind of actually, be in the zone more easily. And, prices are obviously.
I'm hearing that we're very close to seeing the release of stuff that looks more like the Google Glasses that came and went 5-10 years ago. But those technologies, I hear, have been really developed to the next level, and there's about to be some huge developments in that area.
Yeah, and suddenly it becomes a content question, right? The physical is there now. Can you produce stuff that is?
I think we're going to see that stuff launched this year. I think what I'm hearing is that we are going to see some much lighter, like Google Glasses, just sets of glasses launching this year.
Very exciting. Innovation, all through this, as you're talking about a willingness to take risks and try new things and push for innovation, and obviously you have a big budget for that. How do you think about it, and how do you foster that kind of culture and maintain it when you've got such a strong sort of institutional platform in New Zealand, maintaining that energy to keep pushing forward and keep expecting more from what you can do, and willing to take risks to invest in new digital platforms and new conference events and all of those things that drive the innovation? How do you sort of embed that in the people around you, and how do you think about it?
Look, it's just really driven by competition and driven by what our customers want. To compete, you're constantly looking to create products that people are going to want, and that if it's B2B, that gyms are going to want. If it's direct to consumer, that subscribers are going to be interested in. So our group fitness department, was sort of our engineering department, they've got a reasonably big team, 50, 60 people probably. First of all, they're every 3 months they're creating a new class of each of our existing programs. So we've got about 25 programs now, and every 3 months there are teams of people who are who are listening to thousands of songs, choosing the 10 for each class, and then starting to iterate them and trialing them over and over again 40, 50 times until they're finally finished and filmed and released. In the online department, sort of similarly, you're constantly innovating to provide a better user experience. So we've got people whose life it is to do that, and we're just constantly looking for new classes, new types of classes that people want. Watching the trends, for instance, coming out of the pandemic, there's been a big, traditionally what people wanted to a large degree was physical results. There'd always been an aspect of also sort of the emotional health, but this has grown much bigger. People always said with pump they got great physical results, but they also felt strong and empowered coming out of it. And so this has been a big thing. Strength training has increased, particularly for women, has increased dramatically coming out of the pandemic. People are saying we want to be strong, we want to feel strong, we want to feel emotionally strong and resilient and empowered. So at that end, we're launching all sorts of different strength programs. Strength development is one, strength lab is another, but a whole bunch of other. Strength isn't just weight training. Yoga is a form of functional strength, and Pilates and all of those things that manifests in different ways. And we've got a new class called Shapes, which is a sort of a Pilates style sculpting class, which is just booming. All of these strength classes. At the other end, one of the other things coming out of the pandemic that people wanted was they wanted serenity. They wanted to sort of chill out and de-stress. So we're seeing also a rise in your mind-body classes, in your yoga type of classes. They're going through a big growth spurt as well, and we're just sort of innovating with new forms of that. Body Balance, which is our traditional yoga-based class, it's a yoga fusion class. It's yoga, Tai Chi, and Pilates. That's been around for 25 years now. It was really the world's first yoga fusion class, and that's huge. It's probably the biggest yoga program in the world. It's in 10 or 11,000 gyms, studios around the world. So just quietly, it's become maybe the biggest yoga brand in the world. When we launched it, of course, the traditional yogis said, "Oh, you can't do that. You can't put yoga to music. You can't mix yoga with Pilates and other things." But now, most yoga teachers around the world do it to music and mix it with Pilates and other modalities. It's become the thing, and we really started that. And we've been working with yoga since the early 80s. We'd had different yoga programs, but 25 years odd ago, we launched Body Balance, and that's the biggest yoga fusion program in the world. But anyway, yeah.
I may have been to a Body Balance once or twice in my life. They're lots of fun. You talk about sort of being strong in the body and strong in the mind, and sort of that kind of, I think maybe it's the post-COVID world, this hot topic of resilience and overcoming setbacks. How do you have you had particular things as a leader of a big organization and the challenges you face in that role that you do to personally to kind of get yourself in the right space of mind and being able to keep going and keep pushing and delivering for everyone involved?
Interesting question. I certainly sports is a big part of it for me. I work out pretty much every day, and I do weight training. I do bike classes. I'll go riding my bike outside with my AirPods in, and that stuff charges me up. It keeps me energized and empowered, feeling empowered and feeling strong in the same way that it does everybody else. I think I just have always had a tremendous passion and a tremendous drive to do what we've done, and you just have to drive through the setbacks and the you just have to be resilient. You've got to survive. It's when you've got a business, it's survival instinct. Probably helps if you love it, and I do. I'm still passionate about it. I still love being involved in it after all the years.
Yeah, and another love of yours, I think I read that you had a background before all this in music, and that's no doubt informed the importance of music within Les Mills. How do you think, is it still a passion for you? And obviously, how do you make sure that you're sort of on point and within the business and having it as, because it is so central to its success?
Yes, look, everybody. I think everybody loves music. My sister married a rock and roller, and I wound up being involved in that business when I was doing my last year at university in LA. That band, which was New Zealand band Hello Sailor, was one of our great iconic bands over the years. They came to LA when I was there, and I wound up after a period. I wound up being involved with managing them for a while, and had a year or so in that industry. It was very exciting. I guess watching what rock stars did in that industry helped me to develop the teacher training system for training instructors, training sports coaches to sort of to be entertainers and to be to create excitement and experiences and be great mass communicators and all that. Some of the things that I just observed there and picked up, and I involved people from those industries, from the entertainment industries, and in the early days, and helping to train teachers and build the systems that we used for that. So yeah, I mean, everybody loves music, and that industry is a very exciting industry. For me, it wasn't a healthy industry. I really, my first love was sport and health, and so I was only in it for a little while before going back into the gym. But certainly, I took something from the entertainment industry with me, I think. But
well,
yeah,
when you go to Les Mills, it feels like a concert, frankly. So a lot of the time, there's the same sense of energy there, as you say.
And we put a lot into music. We really put a lot in. We spend millions and tens of millions of dollars licensing music, and we have relationships with every music company in the world. Our music department is quite a big department in the company. If we can't license a song, we'll license the publishing rights for it, and we'll get a cover version made, usually using New Zealand artists. We're one of the biggest employers, maybe the biggest employer of New Zealand musicians. And more we are employing songwriters and DJs and people around the world to create our own music for us. So it is a big part of what we do, and it's a passion. Music is something that people love, that just has been proven to really motivate people to exercise. And as you say, you get through a lot more exercise when you're listening to music. I think we've all experienced that.
It's a family business now. And so you work, I believe your wife is involved, is that right? And perhaps, and your daughter and son, am I right there?
Yeah, Jackie really was one of the key people. We launched the business around the world together back in the day, starting back in, we first met in 1980, and really that's been a team effort. Everything that's happened around the world, Jackie's been as much responsible for it as I have, if not more. She had a career as a doctor for about 25 years, and but part-time sort of drove the business and the development of the programs and things with me through that time, until we became so big that she had to quit medicine and move back into the industry. But Yes, our kids, Dinah and Les, who are in their mid-30s, came into the business at the end of university, and really with the beginning of the millennial generation, they transformed the business. I think at that stage we were starting to age as a business. The sort of classes that we made and tastes were changing, and they really have led the development of the millennial and Gen Z programming. We're right now just launching a whole bunch of new Gen Z programs. 10 years plus ago, they created a whole bunch, they and their friends and teams created a whole bunch of programs for millennials, like the Grit programs, the bunch of hit programs we have called Grit, and the Trip and core training and a whole bunch of other things like that. That really renewed the company. They renewed all of the programs, the music and the style of exercises. Again, they and the choreography teams, people like Glenn Ostergaard, really renewed all of those programs, different types of music, different types of exercise, different types of equipment, which has kind of kept us young and fresh. We were aware that we needed to renew ourselves, and that we need to constantly renew ourselves. So now that's embedded. That's just part of what we do. It is, you're constantly renewing yourself. And of course, when you're creating new classes for all these programs every 3 months, you have a chance every 3 months to reinvent any one of those classes.
Yeah, and bring in new ideas. I assume, though, that it means that your Christmas lunch is actually a business meeting. Is that right, or is it something that you manage to keep out of the family home?
No, you do. We do that, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that families working in a business is something that's good for the family. I think that it's been great for Jackie and my relationship. We've always had this excitement and this passion, this shared passion, and we always would excitedly talk about the things that we were doing and developing. And I think that that's been the same with the rest of the family and the wider team. It makes great culture to be on a sort of an innovation mission together.
Yeah, and a collective journey. You're also involved in Pure Advantage. Could you just tell us a little bit about what that is and why that was something that became really important to you?
Yes, Pure Advantage is a business-led group which is really focused on where we came into being. We started in 2008 as we called ourselves the 100% Pure Plan. And we said, climate change is really something that we've got to deal with, sustainability, climate change. We want to promote the argument that this is something that is not just good for the environment, but good for the economy. This low carbon industry is going to be really one of the very biggest things that happens in business in this century, because it has to be, otherwise we've got serious problems. And so that group has grown and evolved, had some fantastic people who have been involved in it since the beginning, people like Stephen Tyndall and like Rob Morrison, who are heavily involved and drive that together with me. It's something that we just believe very strongly. We have to deal with climate change, otherwise nobody's business is going to be very good at 3 degrees warming.
Yeah. And so the initiatives that you're focused on is bringing business along to trying to figure out new sustainability opportunities and in planting and other sort of a spectrum of different initiatives to support the transition.
We've done things over the years, like we've had Vivid Economics, a big UK economics group, do an analysis of the New Zealand's strategic advantages, our core strengths in different areas of low carbon industry. We did that study. That study was repeated again. It was repeated by a political group a few years later, and looked at the things that we're good at, looked at some of the ways that New Zealand could do well. For us, really, one of the big ones has been in forestry and in farming. We've basically, what's happening in the world is, it's going to take us a number of decades to get through the energy transition. Things are bad, as you can see from the last few weeks in Auckland, and things are going to get worse over the coming decades with climate change. So it is a matter of building resilience, of adapting and building resilience while we go through this process, adapting to the bad things that are going to happen and being able to be resilient to them and sequestering an immense amount of carbon and until we can get away from using fossil fuels. And and so some of the big ways that New Zealand can do that well, for instance, are in through farming, through what's called regenerative farming, where you sequester immense amount of carbon in soil, and through planting and regenerating native forests, which sequester a huge amount of carbon, but also create drought resistance, flood resistance, localized cooling, the whole concept of spongy cities where you can absorb sort of floodwaters better. Those sorts of things are very important ways to deal with climate change. And those are things that we, Pure Advantage, and a lot of other groups in the country have been working on a lot over the last. We got really involved with working in forestry around this area of forestry in about 2015, and right now we're sort of pushing hard to see a massive increase in native forests, native rainforests around the country. We'd love to see millions more hectares of true native mixed species rainforest. This would be something that would help New Zealand a great deal. It's about building, a livable planet, really, while we get through the energy transition. And some of these things, if we could dramatically increase the amount of native forest in New Zealand, this would, and move towards regenerative farming. These would be things that would really help us to create a livable country, to create resilience during this period.
Yeah, and help make the contribution to solving the broader issue. I think it's obviously it's a great initiative, and and you've got working alongside some people who can make significant
and huge
waves.
economic opportunities for people, and
huge economic opportunities. That's
renewables,
right.
and all of those things.
Phillip, I'm conscious of time. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a really great conversation. You're obviously on an amazing journey, and I wish you and Les Mills and Jackie all the best for the next wee while, and as you just grow your franchise and help New Zealand become a fitter and healthier place.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.
Great. Thank you.
This has been the Monday Call, brought to you by NZ Funds. New Zealand Funds Management Limited is the issuer of the NZ Funds KiwiSaver scheme, the NZ Funds Managed Superannuation Service, the NZ Funds Advised Portfolio Service, the NZ Funds Wealth Builder, and NZ Funds Income Generator. A product disclosure statement for each is available at nzfunds.co.nz. Past performance is not necessarily an indicator of future returns.